I'm back from Tokyo with a new start to add to my World Marathon Majors collection. I've also got a brand new PB to show for it. So now I'm ready to talk about my Tokyo Marathon 2023 race recap. Yo, what's going on everybody? My name is Kofuzi and I just got back from running the Tokyo Marathon. I've already made a race video and I've also made a travel video from my time in Japan, but now in this video specifically, I want to talk about the race itself, some of the mechanics of it, what was going through my head, what I was feeling in my body, and because these videos tend to be a little bit long, I'm going to jump right into it. First, let's start off with the race kit. I was wearing the Asics Actibreeze singlet. It was customized by my friend Greg Itahara, but the singlet itself is available on the Asics website. It is one of my favorite singlets that they've ever made. As for the hat, I didn't go with a hat this time. I normally run with a hat. I instead decided I would go with kind of more of like the samurai bun for the long hair, and I wore just like a black headband to kind of just make sure some of the shorter flyaways would kind of stay in place. It was a bit chilly on the day. It started out in the low 40s and ended in the low 50s, or I believe that's like 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. And so I wore arm sleeves, just some generic arm sleeves that I had bought off Amazon. These came in a 3-pack. I did not wear any gloves, but mainly because I had worn the gloves earlier in the week and then misplaced them somewhere in my hotel room. I didn't find them until I was packing to go home. So I didn't have gloves with me, but it turns out I actually didn't really need them at all. For socks, I wore Stance socks, which is a pair of socks that I've been running in. There's like the low cut, thin Stance socks. I've been running and racing in those for a long time now. They're some of my favorite socks to run in. And for the shoes, I went with the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus. It's the shoe that I had my current PB, or the, I guess, previous PB, from when I ran Grandma's last summer in 2022. Ran a 258 with that shoe. A lot of the other people that I ran with elected to run in the Super Blast. I ran in that shoe at CIM, and that was a lot of fun for that race, but that wasn't kind of like an A race for me. And for me personally, with the Super Blast, I love running long runs in it, but when it came to like trying to run a race, I felt like towards like after mile 20, 21, I was really missing the carbon, and so I wanted to make sure I had carbon for this race in Tokyo. For the pants, I wore half tights. I wore Janji half tights because they are a little bit longer than the Rabbit Speedsters that I normally wear. And they also have a really good number of pockets because I was going to be carrying 6 gels. So that was my nutrition for the race. And also with this race, it was going to be really important that I able to eat the gel and also keep the trash on my person. I normally do anyway, but I wanted to make extra sure. And the pockets have really good kind of dividers on the side of the Janji pants, which normally are kind of like, it's kind of overkill for me, but I wanted to keep my gels and my trash really, really separate. Just wanted to make sure that there was good division there, and those half tights let me do that. Next, let's talk about nutrition. I already mentioned the 6 gels. I went with 6 Martin gels, 3 caffeinated, 3 not caffeinated, and I kind of alternate between a not caffeinated and then a caffeinated one. And I take one every 4 miles. And a lot of times 6 gels is kind of too much. I bring 6, I try to eat 5, but usually by that 6th one, I just don't feel like eating gels anymore. But I didn't have any problems taking down any of my gels. They all went down fairly smoothly. I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of my after the race, but it all went down smoothly, and I was also able to take the Pocari Sweat, which was the sport drink that was on course. Now, Pocari Sweat is not something that, as far as I could tell, is available in the United States, and the first time I had it was the day before the race. I bought a bottle of it from not a vending machine. I got it from a combini the day before, so I could at least test out the flavor and see what it was like. And also I figured, I could do some carb loading by drinking the sugary drink. I feel like it tastes pretty good. It has a very light, subtle flavor. It has a subtle thickness to it, so it's not quite as thin as like Gatorade is. So it's a little bit kind of, not syrupy is not the right word, but there's a little bit more body to it. And to me, it tastes like white grape with grapefruit juice, just a touch of that sourness at the end. And as I was taking it on the course, I felt like it tasted a lot less sweet and much more subtle as I was running, and I felt like it was a really great sport drink to have. A couple things that I want to tell you guys in case you're planning on running Tokyo in subsequent years is there's one, I didn't know this until I was out there on the course. They don't hand you the cups like they do in the US. Like sometimes they'll hold it from the top or they'll hold it from the bottom and you kind of grab it out of someone's hand. They don't do that in Japan. I don't know if that's every year or if that's just a COVID measure over there, but everything was off of a table. They would space them out really far so it was easy to kind of grab one cup. And the cups were tall, so that way, even though it had a large amount of fluid in it, it wasn't sloshing around all that much. So I don't feel like I spilled nearly as much on my face as I normally do at like a race in the United States. So I was able to drink the Pocari Sweat really easily. I enjoyed, after the shock of the first one, but I enjoyed like grabbing it, like kind of like elites grab their bottles off the table. I enjoyed grabbing it off the table and being able to drink it. Something that I didn't know even until the end of the race when someone mentioned it to me is that as you're going through the drink station, there are numbers above each table. It'll say like 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7, 8, so on. And on your bib, there's a number, not just your bib number, but you have another number as well. And that other number is telling you which drink table you should drink from. And the idea with that is to spread it out so that way not everyone's trying to get drinks from the first table, and so there's fewer traffic jams. The last thing I want to say about the drink stations is they're not as frequent as they are in races in the US. I feel like a lot of races in the US, like Chicago, New York, maybe not the first couple of miles, but after that, there's a drink station like almost every mile, it seems. They're very frequent, maybe every other mile, but like 1 to 2 miles is about how far apart they are. In Japan, they were only, or at least in Tokyo, they were every 5K. So they're a little bit more spread out. So it's kind of a bigger deal if you miss your drink station. But hopefully between the way that they have it really far spread out, the drink stations, aid stations were very long. And with the numbering system, so you go to your number table and no one yelled at me for grabbing a drink from the wrong table. So you should be okay. Just keep in mind, it's not as frequent as you might be used to. All right, let's get into the race day itself, and let's start with breakfast. I stayed at the Keio Plaza Hotel, Keio, and that's pretty much right on the start line. So like the nice thing about that was a couple of things. One is that I wouldn't have to commute or worry about taking a train or getting a taxi or whatever, or walking. I just basically stepped outside and I was kind of in the corral entry area. Like here's where you get to the corrals where like the gates and stuff are. So that was really convenient. And the race starts relatively late. It starts at 9:10 in the morning. Corrals close at 8:45 a.m. So with us not having to go far or ride a bus, like if it's a point-to-point race, we planned on leaving the hotel at like 8:15. We ended up leaving a little bit earlier than that, and that was probably a good idea. So we left kind of like 8:10-ish, and that was a good amount of time to be able to navigate through everything. We didn't have to walk that far, and we also didn't bring any throwaway clothes with us, or most of us didn't. So it kind of minimized our time having to be outside. It also minimized our time needing to like stand in line for porta potties, because I was able to go to the bathroom in my hotel room multiple times after breakfast, and then still have plenty of time to get to the race. And I didn't feel like I needed to use the porta potties at all in the race. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of info into the porta potty situation or the bag check situation, because I didn't really use either of those things for this race. Hopefully there's other people that are out there that are making videos that can shed a little bit more light on that. But in terms of breakfast, let's rewind the clock a little bit further back. The Keio Plaza Hotel has a really nice breakfast buffet, mostly Western style stuff with a couple of Japanese flourishes in there. But like if you need a Western style breakfast, you can definitely get it there. And because we were eating at 6, the breakfast buffet opened at 5:30 a.m. on race day. We got there at 6 and I had plenty of time to eat a regular normal size breakfast. And so I had plenty of time to make sure everything kind of settled before I had the race. So I had scrambled eggs, tater tots, a lot of fruit, and some coffee. I can't remember if I had any pastries that day or not, but I probably did. Getting in through the corrals was relatively easy. I won't spend too much time on that because I think things are gonna change a lot, or hopefully they'll change a lot. A lot of the kind of stress of getting through the corrals dealt with a lot of COVID measures. I did have to bring my phone. Everyone had to bring their phone to be able to show like proof that you went through all the proper safety measures and health checks. As we were walking towards our corral entrance, it was odd to me that like a lot of people who had got to corral, I guess B or maybe A, I'm not sure what corrals they were, got there very early and sat in very neat rows as they were waiting for like race time to start. I'd never seen anything like that before. Once I got into my corral, it was kind of like a regular corral like I've seen at kind of any other race. I thought I had plenty of time, and I didn't see any pace cards really, so I was just like, I kind of want to be ahead of the 3-hour pace group when I start, but I was with some other people who are going to be starting and running a little bit of a slower pace, so I was just kind of hanging out with them in the beginning, just trying to stay loose. And then after a while, I just kind of noticed there was a lot of people kind of like inching forward. So I was like, I gotta go. So I just kind of left and started moving up as far as I could before I got into a roadblock. I didn't realize just how big Corral C was gonna be. I don't think I got halfway to it, and I still saw eventually the 3-hour pace card, like a big round sign, like a pace flag. It was several hundred feet in front of me, and I was like, there can't possibly be this many 3-hour runners, so I'm not sure where I'm standing. I didn't know how deep Corral C went in terms of seeded times, so I'm like, it can't be that slow. So like, even if I start from the back, it should be relatively easy to run around 3-hour pace or a little bit faster. So I wasn't too concerned about it at first, but I'm not sure what happened, but like once the race actually started, there was a ton of congestion. So at the start, the gun goes off, they shoot off all the confetti. I think it's supposed to look like cherry blossom leaves. And really beautiful, really exciting. So then soon I found myself looking at my watch saying like, I was running like 8-minute miles or 8-minute mile pace. And I was like, this definitely feels like that. I felt like I was jogging. I felt like I had to short step a lot because there was just so many people around me. It was just a very crowded experience, and I don't think I've ever really quite seen that big of a crowd for that long before. So it was a little bit unusual, and I did my best not to panic and not to weave. I saw a lot of people trying to like dart in between like people to get out in front. And I was like, that looks like it's taking up a lot of energy, and ultimately how much farther ahead am I going to end up being anyway? And so I just kind of hung back, waited for natural gaps in the people to kind of happen so I could resume kind of my pace. But it definitely took me about 1.25 miles before I felt like I could like open up and like run what I felt like was marathon effort. Problem was at that time, and that's probably the only time in the race where I felt like my watch was a little bit inaccurate and I couldn't tell what pace I was running. Sometimes I would look down and it'd tell me I was running 8-minute miles. Sometimes I would look down and it'd tell me I was running 5-minute miles, which is something that I really can't do. So I knew something was off. So at that point I just said, you know, I know what marathon effort is. I practice a lot of marathon effort miles in my long runs. I'm gonna run what that feels like. The problem was like, because there were so many people around me moving kind of at my pace, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, it just was really disorienting in terms of like, how fast am I moving? I don't know. And so like, you feel good at the beginning of a marathon, you've got a lot of adrenaline. I was like, am I running too hard? I can't tell. I don't know what paces everyone around me is running. So like, I was just trying to like get my bearings the best I could. It was still very confusing. And the first 5K came in at 21:50, which was a lot slower than my goal 5K splits of 20 minutes and 40 seconds. So I was 70 seconds off pace already. So that was, again, a little concerning, but I thought to myself, you know what, it's a long race. I've still got like 7 more 5K splits to hit, and you know, plenty of time to kind of make up that time. If I ran those 2040s, I would have ended up with a time of just under 2:55. So that's kind of where I thought my fitness was for the day. Let's now move to like kind of like 5K to 10K and 10K to 15K. So we'll go over that kind of like 10K block. For that next amount of time, I was still kind of trying to just settle in. I felt a lot more comfortable then. I had been passing people have been passing us, but I was starting to see like a small group coalescing of familiar faces. And so I kind of like was really focusing in on especially as I got closer to the 15K mark, right about then, figuring out like, all right, how do I spend the least amount of energy? How do I spend the least amount of time thinking about what's happening? Let's just kind of like fall in with the group and just try to like float along on this river of people the best that I could. Those splits ended up being pretty good for the 10K mark. That 5K split was 20 minutes and 32 seconds. And for the 15K mark, the 5K split was 20:27, which is, you know, a lot faster than the 20:40 that I had been planning on, but I had a little bit of time that I wanted to make up. And ultimately, I also wasn't going to worry too much about running a little bit too hot, like a second or two per mile too hot. because of the fact that I found a group of people that I wanted to run with and kind of just stay with for as long as we could. Eventually coming through at the half at like 21.1, we came in at 1:28.07, which again is a little bit slow from the 1:27.30 that I had kind of been targeting. But overall, ultimately, I'm like, there's still a lot of race left. It's starting to feel hard, which for me, right around that 15K mark, I get like my mind starts thinking, is this hard? I think this is hard. I think should we slow down? Maybe we should. Like those kinds of thoughts are starting to like creep in. And I feel like at the halfway mark, I was having those thoughts. I wasn't giving in to them. And so I just felt like this is normal. This is all like, everything's where it's supposed to be. So I felt kind of good at that point. Also at this point, we had already seen a couple of like switchbacks, which overall, I didn't think that those were nearly as bad as I had feared they were gonna be. But overall, they were really smooth. And the thing I liked about them is that because you're like running down and coming back up the street, as you come back, you get to see runners, or as you're going down, you get to see the runners ahead of you. And I found that to be really fun for this course. I got to see a lot of the elites as they went by. And I did spend a lot of time like looking for my friends, although I saw none of them who were behind me. So that was kind of disappointing, but I spent a lot of time kind of like distracting myself by looking at the other side of runners, and I really enjoyed that. I usually, in that situation, I would cheer for the other side runners a lot more, like very vocally. But in my opinion, the Tokyo Marathon is a very quiet marathon. Given the number of runners, given the number of spectators, there were a lot of people out lining the streets, and I could feel their support, but they did it all very quietly. There was a couple of times there were groups where like they all wore like yellow ponchos, I think for visibility, and they had those clapper things, and I really appreciated that. They were making noise. And then a couple of like Western groups of people would have cowbells, or they'd just be cheering for runners. But for a lot of times, I would hear an occasional like "Gambare," like people would like kind of quietly give you encouragement as you ran by if I was close. But there were times where like, you know, I'll run by the spectators with the GoPro and I'll start waving at people. There were times where people just were like, I don't know what that guy is doing. And they would just like watch me come by and smile and wave and just no reaction whatsoever. So like, you know, it was kind of odd that it was such a quiet course. But at that 25 mark, those 5K splits were where things started getting really tough. Getting in up to the 30K mark, which is about like mile 19 or so, that's when my body really started thinking like, oh, we've been doing this for a while. I don't know if I can hold it. So a lot of negotiating, mental negotiating starts to happen. And I tried to put all those thoughts away, and I didn't think that I was meditating, but I was talking with Thomas from the Believe in the Run about it later, but he told me that I was basically meditating. I was trying to like let those thoughts happen and just fall, you know, kind of hit me and then fall off rather than stick. And then think about my breathing, think about my foot strike, think about the sounds of my breathing and foot strike, and just think about my form. And remembering that, look, I know what marathon effort is. I'm going to give marathon effort, and whatever pace that gives me, that's going to be the time. I don't care if it's slow, maybe it's fast, maybe it's exactly what I think it is, but I'm not going to look at the watch. So I spent very little time from like 25 to 30K looking at the watch. I think maybe one time, and I was very happy to see that at the 30K split, the previous 5K had come in at 20 minutes and 33 seconds. I felt like the effort was there, but mentally it was harder to like lock in and access that effort. And then doing the other thing that I like to do when I get more tired in a marathon or in a long run is to try to fixate on a point really far in the distance and just kind of like stare at it 3D magic eye style, lose focus of everything around me and just kind of just run, trying to like lose myself a little bit in terms of like just feeling the motion and not worrying about how far is it, how fast am I going, all that stuff, just kind of like look ahead and kind of go. So that's what I was doing for that 5K as well. And the split ended up turning out 20:49 seconds. So it's definitely getting a lot harder because we're getting into that home stretch. We're at 35K, that's like 22 miles in. And I'm still pretty much right on pace for kind of where I want to be. I'm thinking, all right, at this point, I'm not going to try to erase the 70 seconds that I lost in the first 5K. So I might not get my 2:55 for the day, but I'm gonna just try to hold on to whatever I have left. But that's when things started to get really, really tough. So at the 21-mile marker of this course, you go on your last kind of like out and back. You go out for 2 miles and you come back, and then there's like another mile for the finish. But that was mostly that 35 to 40K final 5K split. Started to get a little bit sunnier at that point too, so it was a little bit warmer. And that farthest spot on that last out and back, it started to get a little bit quieter on that course, because, you know, like some of those areas towards the end of a finish line, people would rather just meet their people at the finish line. So there's sometimes aren't that many people. I kind of felt like it got a little bit quiet there too.
And it's really in this part of the race where I'm starting to feel like that earlier kind of negotiation that your body has with you, or that your mind has with you, and maybe you could ease up a little bit, really starts to get a lot louder and more kind of persuasive, and really starts turning into a lot of doubt. But I think the key to kind of breaking through some of those mental barriers and some of those physical barriers in the marathon is to think of it like this. All you have to do to achieve your marathon running goals is to say yes, that you want it. The problem is, the question gets asked to you at the most difficult time. For a lot of marathons, my mind was so kind of like overwhelmed with the intensity, with the pain, with the kind of the noise of the marathon, that I couldn't even remember to ask myself that question. The marathon is asking me, do you still want to hit your goal? And a lot of times that's when you answer, you don't realize what you're answering, but you're answering, well, maybe I need to back off just a little bit. I'm not sure, I need to play it safe. Maybe I should ease up. That's a marathon asking you if you still want your goal. And that's you answering, no, I don't. I've learned that you can't give up in those tough last couple of 5K splits. You have to really dig deep and remind yourself that when that question gets asked to you, do you still want it? You have to just say yes. So the mantra for this marathon definitely became just say yes, just say yes. Kept reminding myself that I still wanted it, and that it was up to me to decide whether I wanted to hit a goal for that day or not. Really going to the well, the thing that I avoid during the entire marathon training block, emptying myself out, leaving everything out on the course, on the roads. That's what I went to Tokyo to do. I went there to put it all out there, to see what I could do if I laid everything out on the line. And so that's where that other phrase that I used, which was, what did we come here to do? This is what we came here to do. That became the other mantra for the marathon.
But that last 5K split was very tough. I came in at 21:28. About a kilometer left, you make a big turn, and then you're on that cobblestone street. I think they call it a cobblestone street, but it's almost more of like a tiled street, because the stones are very tightly packed and very smooth. So I really wouldn't worry about footing on that last final kilometer. But I will tell you that it is a very, very long kilometer. I felt like I crossed a lot of intersections. So I'm like, how many blocks long does it take to get to a kilometer? Because I know that once there's still one more turn, and there, at that turn, you still have like another 200 meters to the finish. So I was like, man, how much further do I have to go? And then at one point I crossed another intersection, and then it felt like just something had shot me from behind, and my left hamstring just locked up really tight. I couldn't like bend my leg anymore. And I was like, oh, I think I might have to walk this one in. I wasn't sure. Like, so I went from like running to kind of a very, very slow jog. And I was like, this might be how I finished like the last half mile. And I'm trying to do some math in my head, thinking like, all right, how long is that going to take me? Will I still be able to get under 3 hours? And I was very concerned, but I was like, hey, you know what? It was a good 42K. I didn't make it the 42.195K, but I had a pretty good race. And so, you know, it is what it is. And I was kind of resigned to that. And as I was thinking that and like kind of like coming to terms with that, all of a sudden I realized, oh, my leg has loosened up. That cramp, that knot had kind of loosened up a little bit. So I was able to pick up the pace again. And so I kind of wish that I'd maybe been paying a little bit closer attention to it, and not necessarily assuming that because a muscle locked up, that it would stay locked up the whole time. And in fact, just momentarily locked up, and then I was able to release again. So then at that point, I was able to kind of have one final push of about maybe 300 meters, 400 meters. And then you make the turn and you see the finish line. And it's a pretty fantastic finish from there. Came in, crossed the line at an official time, chip time, of 2 hours, 56 minutes, and 47 seconds. A really nice improvement from my previous PR, about a 2-minute PB for me. After the race, you have a little time to kind of mingle in the post-race area. Immediately there, they kind of still do want you to keep moving through. So I kind of went through there. Once you kind of leave the finishing chute, there's a sign that says, make sure you put on a mask, and someone giving out fresh masks to everybody. At that point, you were able to get some water, which was great because I was really thirsty. I was incredibly thirsty after the race. I remembered at that point when I was really thirsty that I had skipped one of the later aid stations and didn't get that last kind of dose of Pocari Sweat. And that may have resulted in the little bit of cramping that I had at kilometer 42 or 41 and change, but I was very happy to drink some water, and then I was able to get a medal. We got a space blanket, and then also we were able to get, I think, one of my favorite things that I've gotten after a marathon, which is like the poncho towel, the Tokyo Marathon poncho towel. It was incredibly warm. It was the exact right level of warmth that I wanted. For the day. I was chilly, but it wasn't nearly as cold as I had seen in some other YouTube videos, but having that towel was really, really nice. The other thing to remember, and this is kind of the last thing one of the last things that I'll say, is that the other thing that's on your bib, so we already talked about the number, your number is on the bib, the number for your aid station is also on the bib, and then there's a color for your bib. So a lot of people had C for the corral, but we all had different colors. And what they do is there's kind of 2 ways to go once you finish, and you have to follow the direction of your colors. That way it kind of keeps everyone from kind of clogging up too many areas, and that way they kind of disperse people properly. But the thing to remember is if you do have friends and family that are coming to see you and wanting to meet up with you, you have to make sure that they know what color you are, so that way you can plan your reunion appropriately once you get through all that finishing area. I'm trying to remember if there were snacks that were available to eat right after the finish, and I think that there was. One of the things they gave away was like a recovery shake kind of thing. It came in a pouch, but I didn't eat it. And in fact, I didn't really eat much of anything for hours after the race, even into the evening. It wasn't until dinner, and even then, I only ate a very little amount of food because, like, I don't know if it was the Pocari Sweat, if it was all the gels, a combination of everything. I'm not sure what it was, but I've never had my stomach feel so unsettled for so long after a marathon. Usually after a marathon, I'm ready to eat pretty much right away. I'm like, give me a beer and give me some food because I'm ready to celebrate a race completed. But for this one, I did have a couple of beers kind of like right away, but after we got to the hotel, I pretty much had to take a nap because my stomach felt so bad. Everyone else was celebrating, but I was like, you guys are gonna have to go on without me because my stomach was unsettled. I was having some digestive issues as well. So I really wasn't in a position to be leaving the hotel room for several hours until basically dinner time. So that was kind of an unfortunate kind of damper on the day, but overall I had a really great time with this race. It was executed really well. There was a little bit of congestion in the beginning, but ultimately that may have been my saving grace because it then made me pace myself just a little bit at that beginning portion of the race. So I wouldn't change a single thing for how it unfolded for me on the day. I had a great day, and you can never be upset when you run better than you've ever run in your entire life. So thank you to the Tokyo Marathon for putting on such a fantastic race. I had a fantastic time, and I don't know when I'll ever be able to go back, but if I ever given the chance, I would definitely take the opportunity to run that one again. So that's all I have for my Tokyo Marathon recap, and that's gonna be the end for my Tokyo content. Stay tuned because soon we're gonna flip right over because we got Boston Marathon coming up, and we're gonna talk about kind of the training that I use to get ready for Tokyo and how I'm gonna kind of continue some of that as we get into Boston. So stay tuned and hit the subscribe button if you wanna see more of that. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments down below, or the best way to get in touch with me with questions is to come to the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?